Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast updates. I'm your host, Anna Garcia. In February of 2022, Danielle Iredale joined me on the podcast to discuss a messy love triangle that ended in a murder and a failed plot to collect less than $30,000 in life insurance. On January 2nd of 2020, Chad and Nikki Entzel's home caught fire. And after they put the blaze out, firefighters discovered Chad's body inside. He suffered a gunshot wound to the head and was likely killed sometime in the end of December of 2019. Chad's ex-wife, Nikki, and her lover, Earl Howard, were arrested in connection with Chad's death. Earl pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and other charges and will spend about 21 years in prison before he is eligible for parole. In October of 2022, Nikki was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit arson, and conspiracy to tamper with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years. Let's look back at the True Crime Daily episode where Danielle and I analyzed the case of a man tragically caught in the middle of a love triangle. In our next case, Danielle, I say this all the time, that love triangles always end badly. At the very least, at least one person's feelings will be hurt. And in the worst case, someone or others will end up dead as a result of these triangles. And so here we have a wife and her lover who came up with a simple plot to get rid of the woman's husband. And we see it played out all the time. It's almost as if there's a standard playbook here. Okay, we're going to get a life insurance policy out on the person, husband or wife, before they pass. Then we're going to kill them. We're going to do a really lousy job of covering up the evidence and how we got there. And then as soon as they're dead, we're going to try and collect the life insurance policy. It's the standard playbook. Standard playbook. What always fascinates me is when someone takes this playbook, runs with it, and gets away with it. Because there are people that get away with it.
There have to be, but the ones that get caught certainly aren't the Rhodes Scholars of the bunch.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so here's the plot that these two came up with, according to police. It was to kill the husband while he was sleeping, then burn down the house to eliminate the evidence and cover up the crime, and then collect the insurance. Well, as we all know, and it doesn't take a lot to know this, just because you burn down the house does not mean that you eliminate all the evidence. And if the person has been murdered, shot, it's going to come out in the autopsy. So it's like, hello, people, Yes, not the Rhodes Scholars. This is not the team from the Rhodes Scholars. And as horrible as all of this is, and this is very tragic, what I believe makes this more of an insult is that the payout that they were after was $26,000. Usually when we talk about life insurance policies, people are going on about hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in insurance policy, right? And people are up to debt and all this other stuff. We're talking about $26,000.
And was this woman I read a really nice tribute to the victim in this case. He was a baseball coach. He had two sons. Was this woman, do we know if the woman was also the mother?
We don't believe so. We don't believe so. I don't believe that she is. So let's get to the victims and all of the people here. The victim here is 42-year-old Chad Entzel, and the murder took place in Bismarck, North Dakota. The wife's boyfriend has just been convicted. He entered a plea, and the wife's trial is up next in just a few weeks. So let's go back to the scene of the crime. Police say that they got a call, 911, that there was a house on fire. This was on January 2nd of 2020, so 2 years ago. And the house was like completely engulfed. After firefighters get the fire out, they find the corpse of Chad Entzel. And he had reportedly been shot multiple times. An autopsy showed that he died of a gunshot wound to the head. A double-barreled shotgun was found next to Chad's body. I suppose one could make the argument that maybe initially they were staging this to look like a suicide. But as we all know, placement of weapons and how they're placed has a lot to do with whether they pulled the trigger.
Well, and suicides are generally one gunshot wound, right?
Yeah.
Not multiple.
Yes. And then how do you set the fire after you've shot yourself? Hello? Again. So the coroner believes, this to me is very fascinating. The coroner believes that Chad had been dead at least 3 days before the fire was set. What, your wheels are turning, Danny?
Yeah, that's shocking to me.
So because there was a level of decomposition that they were still able to analyze even though the place had been set on fire. So this is very interesting because this date is going to line up in a very interesting way. So conveniently, his wife, 39-year-old Nikki Sue Entzel, told authorities that she had moved out of the home a few days earlier on December 30th. Oh, is that like 3 days earlier?
Wow.
Okay, timing is lining up. Look at those stars. And that she was living in a motel room. But who was the room registered to and who was paying for it? Oh, that would be her lover, Earl Howard, the man charged in this case as well. So Nikki and Chad married in May of 2016. That is why, Danny, I don't believe that the adult boys could be of this marriage and that she could be the mother.
Makes sense.
And he was working at a company that supplied truck parts, and she owned her own business, a little bakery. Okay. It's unclear when Nikki Sue started her affair with Earl, but police gathered photographic proof that included videos, photos that were given to them by friends and other people. So clearly it wasn't a secret. I mean, if you've got photos that other people are given to you, now it's possible they could have gathered it also, additional information during the arrests, but...
Their phones.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so sometime in November or December of 2019, this would have been, is when Nikki and Earl began to plot what they were going to do with Chad. Now, I would say, can you not divorce Chad and go off, you two? Like, can't you just divorce the man, leave him alone, go on with your life? Like, why is that not an option?
I never get it. And I'm sure that's what comes to everyone's mind, right? Just divorce them.
Yes.
I don't.
No. Okay, so prosecutors say that Nikki Sue took out a $26,000 life insurance policy on Chad a few days before his death. Oh, that's not suspicious, is it, people? And then tried to collect on the policy right after the poor man died.
What are we doing here?
I don't know what we're thinking, but we're clearly not thinking very clearly because that is just, you're not helping your case, right? You're not helping your case. Anyway, it did not take long for police to charge the lovers in this case. Really, it didn't take them but a minute. Earl Howard, who's a dual citizen of the U.S. and Canada, turned himself in a week after the murder. Okay, so police really did act pretty swiftly here within a week of Chad's murder. This to me is just so interesting. Like, it's so dramatic. Like, this could be in like a Bond movie, that the man surrendered himself on the Blue Water Bridge that connects Port Huron, Michigan with Ontario, Canada. Doesn't that sound like incredibly dramatic?
Totally dramatic. And was he fleeing? Did he change his mind? Right? Because he's dual citizen with the United States and Canada. I believe, I'm almost certain Canada has an extradition policy. Yeah. So it wouldn't have been, get out of jail free card, but just an odd location.
On the bridge. Right. I will meet you halfway on the bridge. Yeah. It's like, again, like a movie scene. So what remains unclear to this day is who shot Chad. And I'm going to ask you why this is important, Danny, because here's what Nikki told the police. this is the wife, Nikki Sue told the police that her boyfriend Earl did it. He's the one who shot my husband. She said that it all happened at home, that Earl shot her husband to death after arguing with him in the bedroom on December 30th. Well, what would they have been arguing about? I guess, hello, that's my wife. You shouldn't be sleeping with her. It's a pretty reasonable place to start a conversation.
I guess a fair request.
I think it's fair. But the forensics could not identify on the murder weapon who pulled the trigger. And that has actually been an issue for prosecutors in this case.
Yes. And we know that Earl pled, but I don't think he pled to actually pulling the trigger.
Right. That case, that charge was dropped because right? So Danny, here's what I don't understand. In this case, they can't prove forensically which one of the two pulled the trigger. In this case, that seems to be very important to prosecutors, where in the case right before this, where you have the two brothers charged with murdering Sarah, the mom, it doesn't seem to be an issue.
So I'll answer this with a few thoughts, a few theories, right? In the other case, it's a conspiracy case, and they have their theory, right, as to who pulled the trigger and as to the husband's involvement in that, right? He directed the brother to pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. There's legal theories, acting in concert, conspiracy, wherein other individuals can be held criminally liable for what someone else does. And it makes sense, right? You know, two people go out and they decide to rob a bank and they're both holding guns, right? And they shoot people and someone dies. Both of those people are going to be held accountable to varying degrees by the law. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't just get to say, oh, well, it wasn't me. In this case, it's a question of proof, right? The prosecutors don't want to have a situation where they go to trial with two co-defendants and the co-defendants go like this, right? Because then it's risky and they can risk losing both cases. In this case, Earl came forward and he took responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. He pled guilty. He was sentenced to 25 years. What I find really weird, Anna, is that he was sentenced prior to her trial.
That was part of the condition of the plea deal.
It's odd. And the reason that I think it's odd, at least how it works in my cases and in my experience, when you do have a co-defendant and you have who I think is a cooperator, someone who's like, okay, I'm going to testify against my co-defendant. I'm going to go to the trial. I'm going to help you secure this conviction. And it's obviously going to give me a benefit, etc. Usually the prosecutor will wait until the person does their part of the deal. They testify, they provide whatever evidence, and then they sentence them after because they want to know how much what they did was worth. And they also want to make sure that they're going to follow through.
Right.
In this case, I don't know that he's going to be a witness. There is a mechanism in federal court. It's called a Rule 35, where you can be sentenced and then cooperate, and your sentence can be reduced.
Afterwards.
I don't know what the law is in this state with respect to that, but it's very odd that he pled guilty first, he was sentenced first, and we don't know what's going to happen at trial or what the defense is going to be.
Well, she has pleaded not guilty, and so she has not changed her story the entire time about that it was Earl who did it, it wasn't me, I'm not guilty, and I'm going to fight this the whole way. It is interesting that initially prosecutors were going to try them together, not individually, but together. And then Earl kind of pulled himself away by taking the deal, changing everything going on. Because he is also Canadian, as I was doing some research, I do love the way the Toronto Sun newspaper referred to the lovers as, quote, illicit paramours. You know, you just don't get that enough in crime reporting. Illicit paramours. I'm going to use that.
I think it's worth it.
I think so. Illicit I was just like, wow, I love the way this article was written. It was just so colorful. Anyway, back to our illicit paramours. So it was, of course, working on the defense's side in their favor, the fact that prosecutors could not forensically identify the shooter. As you said, it was a weakness in the case. There was additional risk. So that's why the actual murder charge was dismissed. But of course, Earl still faced the felony charges. As you say, he did a deal. So here's what he got. He pleaded guilty to 4 felonies and was sentenced to 50 years in prison with 25 years suspended on the murder conspiracy, which is the most serious of the charges. He will serve at least 85% of that sentence, which is about 21 years. It's always that math always confuses me. It's like the new math of crime. So basically that means Earl will be about 64 years old before he's eligible for parole. Here's the other thing. The family of the victim, Chad's family, remember he has 2 adult sons.
Yes.
Did not object to the deal. They thought it was a good deal.
I think there's also a finality to it. It's probably, you can never bring someone back, and it's just a terrible thing to imagine looking at the person responsible for causing that pain and that devastation to you. But there might be, I don't know, some piece, right, to that chapter being closed, at least as to, one of the accused.
My guess is that if the family has any additional fury, that it's directed at the wife. Because this is going to be the woman who was in your home. This is going to be the woman who was at the holidays. This is going to be, the woman who took out the policy. Earl may have been a part of this, obviously, as he's just agreed to in the plea deal. But think about it. If you're the family, you're angry at both of them, but you're particularly angry at this widow.
It's even more of a betrayal, right? If indeed she's guilty, and we'll see what happens at the trial, but it's just more of a betrayal. It's someone right? To think about someone I know, someone I probably had in my home.
Yes. Yes. The illicit paramour. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So now, Nikki Sue Entzel has pleaded not guilty, as we've said. Her trial is scheduled to begin February 28th. One additional thing here, just a little background. I don't know where to put it other than to put, a little, little footnote on it, is that she apparently has a history of financial crimes, and it appears that her attorney has managed to keep that from being used in the conspiracy to commit murder. Is that true? Is that accurate?
So I wanted to break that down a little because this is an interesting thing. I think sometimes when these cases go to trial, the public is always somewhat flummoxed by the evidence rules, as am I as an attorney, right? You'd think more is more. Let's put all the facts out there. But it's called motions in limine. You move, which is just a request to the court to keep certain facts out or to put certain facts in. And there's a general theory in the law that, look, if someone's on trial for X, we're not going to bring in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever they did in their past, because we want the jury to look at the facts here. We don't want the jury to say, well, they're a bad person, so they must have done this. In this case, the financial crimes have an interesting spin. So the judge said, look, you can't bring them in what's called your case in chief. When the prosecutor's putting on their case, calling their witnesses, you can't bring it up. But if she chooses to testify, they can come in. And I'll tell you why. Not every crime would come in, but crimes, it's called crimen falsi, crimes involving, truth-telling or deceit, do come in under the theory that now that someone's testifying, they want the jury to believe them. So the jury should know whether they've been honest in the past or dishonest. So if you've committed any sort of fraud crime, that's more likely to come in. Whereas if you had, let's say, like a misdemeanor assault, that might not, under the theory that, well, a misdemeanor assault in the past doesn't go to your integrity, right? And your truth telling. So that's how it's going to come out. That'll only come in if she does testify.
Will the jury in her case be told that Earl has already taken a plea deal?
Here's what's interesting. I have had cases like that. I've had cases where the prosecutor says, we're trying everyone together. I had an amazing 5 co-defendant case with all my friends were on the case and they were all there. So no one could really, point the finger at the other one. And then I've had cases where only one person is tried. In California state court, when I've had those cases, the judge has always kept out whoever pled, whoever was convicted. They've always said, you need to consider just the evidence against this defendant. There's an argument both ways, and I don't know how the judge will come out here.
Interesting. Well, we're going to know the answer to that really soon because her trial is coming up at the end of the month.
Yes. I wonder if it'll be televised. I don't know what the state court rules are there.
In Bismarck. I do not know.
We'll see.
Yeah.